Hello and welcome to episode 3 of the This is Marketing podcast. I'm Ross Marone, and in this episode we're going to discuss using analytics for your business. Now, analytics for your business, there's a lot of different variables you have to think about. There's a lot of different types of analytics that you can use to help your business grow and to help analyze your audience and the successes and failures of the different platforms that you're using, the different channels that you're going down, even into your website, to look at your shopping carts or how you're selling online, if you're selling online. There's analytics and there's power of analytics behind all of this. So in this podcast, we're really going to explore the different options that you have and try to understand what kind of metrics are given to you and then how you can use those to apply them back into what you're doing on your business. Now, let's just start with web analytics because that's usually the one that people are most familiar with. Years ago, web analytics used to just be a hit counter at the bottom of our pages. You probably remember back in the early days of the internet, the 90s and the early 2000s, you'd go to a website and you'd scroll down to the bottom, or some businesses like to have it right there at the top, and you'd see, 100,000 views or 1 million views. And although that's a good metric to show that you're getting traffic to your website, that really doesn't tell you anything about your website or your audience. So when analytics kind of started, you had some different options, and you had Web Trends, and you had AW Stats, which is actually still a good one to use for podcasters out there if you really want to see the things that are getting pulled off of your server and see how many times you're actually getting hits on your podcast. That's still a really good one to have installed and using. That's actually what I use. So let's talk about web analytics a little more now that it's matured over the years, and with the introduction of Google and Google Analytics and what they offer as a free service. I think that there's so much power behind what you can actually pull out data-wise from your website and start to understand more about pages, the audience, and what those kind of metrics tell you. Now, when we look at web analytics, there's really 4 things that we can measure. We can measure the acquisition, the audience themselves, the behavior, and their conversions. And when we think about those really 3 important ones, and the 4th one's kind of the audience panel. When you're thinking about your audience, it's good to know the types of audience, especially if you have certain products that are really straight down the line. One's for females, one's for males. It really helps you understand. When you think about a product like what I work with, Catula Prime Meats, one of the products that we sell in the most is beef jerky and different meats online. So you think that would be a strong male audience that would be purchasing those kind of products. But what we actually see is that it's a very strong female audience. And our assumption is that they are buying these products for those guys in their lives, that they're giving them as gifts around Father's Day, around the holidays. So when you look at your audience metrics, you could really dive into them and start to figure out. Analytics shows us a lot about demographics. So with your web analytics, you can see where people come from on a map. Where do they live? You could break down by countries. You could break down by cities. So if you're doing marketing for a business and that marketing is driving people to the website, you can use the audience and the demographic metric to really follow maybe where you've placed media and how that is working by looking at the demographic. And you could actually break this out over time too. You can set time variables that say I want to measure from January 1st to March 31st. When you do something like that for your first quarter and you ran marketing during that period, you can look and see demographically where people came from. And that's also helps with behavior. So if you have a unique URL where you're sending people, I keep saying demographics, I mean geographic. When you look at behavior of where people go to, if you're sending all these audiences to your homepage, it's going to be really hard to measure that against the people that are finding your homepage anyway, especially organically or just by entering in your URL. But if you have a unique URL, maybe it's a subpage of your website, and that is what you're using for specific marketing, then it's much easier for you to track that. I'm not sure that I believe the traditional marketing, the billboard and things. I'm always going to bash those. But when you put a web URL on a billboard, if it's not unique, it's really going to be hard to measure that specific campaign. And that's really one of the ways that you can measure traditional marketing is by having some call to action, whether it's to search for something online or to actually go to a website. So those are things that you need to think about when you're putting together your platforms, but knowing that on the back end of it with the analytics, you can measure that. It's very important. So web analytics is also going to show you behavior, so where people go on your site, We'll talk a little bit more about behavior in a minute. Technology is probably one of the biggest factors right now for web analytics. Knowing what devices your users are using is huge. We talked about this in email marketing too, is the idea that knowing if your web traffic is mobile versus tablet versus desktop really drives the way that you should be designing your website. Now, you can argue all the time and say, well, now web designers are selling me the idea that I have a responsive website, and I have people that are coming, and no matter the device, the website is manipulating and changing itself and kind of morphing down so that it fits on the mobile platform, it fits on a tablet, but if they open it in a browser, it looks like it should with the desktop version. And that's great, but you need to think even deeper than that. At Youngstown State University, we actually have traffic that comes from PlayStations and gaming consoles because now they have built-in browsers. So beyond just the responsive design that your website can have, is there's still going to be functionality, because if you're using Flash, which I would highly recommend you don't, but if you have a Flash element, is it not showing up on a mobile device because mobile doesn't support Flash in certain instances? So those are things that you can look at. You can look at your data and see what your users are telling you. Over and over throughout this podcast and throughout anything that I ever say, I always try to tell the story that you can't force users into doing a certain thing. You can force them down a funnel. You can force them into a sales path, but you can't force them to use a certain type of device that come to your website, because you're going to lose a lot of traffic when you do things like that. So you really need to have capturing information about analytics about your web users, and then adjusting your website or your business plan or whatever it is for your online to match what they're doing. The second part of our metrics for web analytics is acquisition. So we're seeing where people are coming from. And when you think about an acquisition, you have some other variables that play into this. So you have your search engine. So what search engines are sending people to our website? That helps you build your SEO, your search engine optimization. So if you have better SEO, you can understand, okay, well, yeah, we're getting high traffic from Google on certain pages, and that's great because that's exactly what we want, and we're doing something right. You could also break it down and look at your social, so you can see what social platforms. We talked about building a social media team in episode 2. So when you look at the building of that social media and everything that you have surrounding that, is that actually producing traffic where you need it to? We've talked about the sales funnel. So are people starting on Facebook? Are they starting on Twitter or Instagram? And then are they coming into your website? And if so, are they following the path? So when we get into behavior, we'll talk about that. But are they following the path that you want them to from that platform? Whatever content you're building there, is it driving them down? Questions to be asked and data to be analyzed to actually answer those. We could also look at AdWords. Now, we haven't talked about AdWords, and we will in a future podcast, but AdWords is the ability for you to actually buy advertisements online through search and through banner advertisement, which works sometimes. It just depends on how good your graphics are, or again, what your product is. There's a lot of variables that play into that. But we can actually use web analytics to measure the traffic that comes from those sources as well. So the fact that if you're using Google AdWords, the fact that AdWords is owned by the same company, there's a big connection that gets made there. So you can actually look at the keywords that you have placed in your AdWords, the different ads that you're running, the different types of text that you have running there, and then you can track to see if that's producing quality traffic into your website. So we get into behavior then. So that's the third metric that we're going to measure is behavior on your site. And we talk about behavior, again, we're talking about where people are landing on your website, so the content. It also is going to give some idea about the speed of the website as it loads. So if you have a web page that you're driving people to and it has a bunch of images, it has some media files, and it takes a long time to load, depending on the speed of the internet. Now, the internet has definitely gotten faster from the user standpoint. People have better, stronger, faster connections. But if the site's taking a long time to load, that actually affects your search engine optimization. But it can, in some instances, affect the actual user. So if they're waiting around for something to load, you may lose them on that. So we can measure site speed. We can measure events, so things that actually take place within the pages themselves, where people are clicking around and where they're going. What's important here is as we build these funnels, so we're saying they're starting, this program that we're going to run is starting on Facebook with an ad or with a text thing or something, and the call to actions to land on our website on product A's page. And then from product A, we want them to convert within 2 pages. So looking at the site content, we can actually follow a behavior flow to see where they started, if they landed there, and then if they followed the path that we want. The other thing that it's going to tell us is if they don't. So if they came from Facebook, they landed on product A page, and then they left or they went to another page that's kind of out of the reach, you need to think about two things. Why? Is there something on that page that's not working? Or is there something that they want to go straight into contact information rather than to conversion? So instead of buying something, maybe they want to contact you. So you have to have kind of on-the-ground understanding too. So if you're getting phone calls about product A as soon as you started this campaign, you may take those questions and turn them around and say, okay, let's answer these questions on the web page themselves on that product page. That way they don't go to the contact page. They get better at going right into our conversion. So the behavior metrics built within Google Analytics will really tell you a lot about that. The last metric that we're going to look when it comes to web analytics is conversions. So our goals and the conversions. Now, conversions and goals, there's a nice debate out there constantly going on about, well, what's the difference? And it really depends on what you're measuring and what your website is selling, what you're asking people to do. A conversion could be something as simple as we got somebody from the Facebook page to the product A page. That's a conversion. We've converted them from one channel that we have to another channel, the website. It can be that we got them to come in and they give us their email address on a newsletter. That could be considered a conversion. But it can also be considered a goal. So in my mind, conversions and goals are just a nice way for a business to separate two things. Maybe all of your goals have some kind of purchase or sell to them. So you're making money off any goals on your website. Conversions can be leads. So maybe we're getting email addresses. Maybe we're getting people to read information or understand a product more. Time on site can be a conversion. So you can lead someone to product A, and as long as they're there for 1 minute, we know that they're reading something, they're interacting with a page, so we can consider that a conversion on our end. So those are how conversions and goals kind of play out. It's up to you really at the end of the day to decide what those are. What's important about web analytics is that as you're building the actual platform of web analytics and you're getting it installed on your website to actually start collecting all of this data, you need to understand that you have to set up goals and conversions ahead of time. So you need to say to whoever it is setting up Google Analytics for you, and it's easy enough that you could probably do it if you're a little bit dangerous with the web, you need to know where those goals and conversions are going to lie. That way you can set it up on the platform to say, okay, if a person follows this path, Facebook to this page, that counts as a conversion trigger. Because then at the end of this process, after you're starting to collect data, you can go right into your conversion metric in the platform, and you could go down your goals, and you can actually look at them and say, okay, here was goal A, here was goal B, here was goal C, and we had people go through all three of those goals. So with web analytics, there's a lot of power to be had about the data that you're collecting. You can go back and look at your audience data, your acquisition data, and that can help drive your marketing and advertising efforts. If you see a lot of people coming from Google organically, but you know that you're missing some traffic because maybe there's a certain product or keyword that you're just not getting the traffic you need from it, you can go back and use that to build an advertising campaign in Google AdWords and say, okay, here's the audience. We know that because we've gone to our audience metric. We know that it's females that are 44 to 55. And we know that they're coming from Google, and here's some of the keywords they're using. So we could go back into Google AdWords and actually build a campaign that just strengthens that knowledge that we already have. So maybe the users that you're losing in search will end up seeing an ad or end up seeing some content built around that. So there's a lot of power with Google Analytics and your web analytics, and that's just one layer that we're going to talk about in this podcast. The second layer I want to talk about is really social media. And when we talk about social media, you have to understand that each social media channel, whether it's Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or even LinkedIn, has analytics built into them. Instagram, not so much. There's not a big user platform for Instagram analytics. It's really the power of interaction on Instagram, I think. And I don't know that you need to look and dive into analytics on Instagram. You really just got to look at your posts and your interactions that you had. How many people liked it? Did you build an audience? Were people following you because of a post? What comments were being in there? So when we look at our social media analytics, there's reasons Facebook and Twitter have them built in and they're more robust than something like Instagram. Now, Instagram is owned by Facebook, so you're going to get maybe a little more analytic data out of Facebook about your Instagram stuff, but that's really if you're starting to push advertisements to Instagram through Facebook's platform, their ad platform. But when it comes down to understanding how social media is going to play into this, you really got to think back to the first part, which is the web analytics. So I would like to say that you start on your social media analytics once you get them going. First, start with web analytics. If you only have a website and that's your main source of getting customers and reaching out to people on the web, then just use your website to actually interact with them and use the analytics behind those platforms to help drive other things like campaigns and content and product analysis and sales analysis. That's a good place to start. But if you do have social media accounts, as soon as you get those set up, and when I'm talking about Facebook, I don't mean your personal Facebook account. I mean your actual business page. You can go into Facebook, set up a page that is of your business, and once you get 25 people to actually subscribe or follow you or become fans, then you start collecting analytic data about all of those customers or fans. So in Facebook, you're going to see a lot of the same terms. You're going to see an overview, you're going to see an audience metric where it's going to tell you the type of people to come. You're going to see page views, which are going to be just the views on your actual page itself. You only have one page when it comes to Facebook to really collect data about what it is it's broken down into posts after that. So you have your page, you have all the different types of posts you have. You can break those out by the type of media. So if it's a video or an image or just a text post, you can kind of measure those over time and see how they're working. You're going to be able to break out demographic information about ages, and again, we're going to look at gender. Mobile devices are going to come into play here. You're going to see if you got more likes during a time period, and you can correlate that maybe with the types of messages you're putting out. So think of it this way. On Facebook, if you're familiar with a platform and you go out and you do a post, so let's say you make a video post, and that video is really engaging and there's a lot of content to it, and it drives people to like it and share it, then you can actually grow your audience organically just because you post it on your page. We talk about content a lot, and this is really where analytics starts to answer the success or failure of the content that you're producing. And I've constantly talked about it in the last episode and even an email marketing episode, where you're using the audience to tell you what content to produce. You can't just force them, again, to like what you're doing. You can use the analytics behind each of these platforms to really measure it and say, okay, this post outperformed this other one. Well, what was the difference? Was the video the reason because we told a great story and people really like that? Or can we look at an image and say this image was a striking image, it was very controversial even, and maybe that's what forced people to share it or to comment on it or to like it. With Facebook, the better post that you put out, the higher engagement you're going to get throughout your kind of time period on there. So if you do a post that's really highly engaged, the next time you go and post, that next post is going to have the opportunity to get the same kind of results because Facebook really respects good content. So the more that you put out, the better. Other things that we could look at, you can actually look at likes. You can break down a like. So a like isn't just somebody clicking a button. There's a lot more that goes to that. You can look at the types of content, again, that was liked and why it was liked. You can start to decide that. Was an organic like? If you're paying for advertisement, so if you actually do a post on Facebook, you have the opportunity to run ads and push that Facebook post out to people that are in your audience and people that are outside of your audience. Another important thing to consider about Facebook is that they've changed their algorithm over time. It used to be that you would post something and anyone that was a fan of you would get to see it. Well, then they went back and they changed that and they said, well, that's not very relevant because at the time when you like a business or you like a page, you may not be interested in it a month later. You may be interested in it at that time and then you lose interest. So if we keep pushing that content in front of the user, it's going to screw up the platform, number one, because you're going to have a million things coming at you, but it's also going to become less interesting. So people won't use the platform or they may unfollow you. So it was a benefit for everybody, including the platform, including businesses, for them to do what they did. And what they did is they said, we're only going to show this next post or these posts that you do to the audience that engages you the most. And there's a percentage to that. And if you want to get it out in front of more people, we're going to make you pay for it. And in paying for it, we're going to force you to make sure that you're building really good content because you don't want to just blow your money by putting out content out there and paying for it just because you want more people to see it. Now, if you have an unlimited budget and that's the way you want to treat it, by all means, go ahead. I don't care. Facebook doesn't care. They're pocketing what they need to. But if you're spending all this money and it's not relevant and people aren't clicking it and getting to the point where it turns into revenue for your business, then you're the one losing. So by analyzing likes and understanding whether it's organic, which is something we put out there and our audience shared it organically, or if it's something that was paid for, you can see the performance of that as well. The other thing you can measure with the likes is the unlikes. So people that finally said, you know what, enough with this. They're putting out this junk content. I don't want to interact with them anymore. I'm out of here. You can look at that and take those metrics for a time period again and say, okay, we had 3 really good posts. We had an increase in likes. We had high engagement. But then we started posting like this, and we had 3 posts that were, a little bit different than what we normally did, and all of a sudden our unlikes spiked. So you should take those 3 posts, analyze them, figure out what it was about them, and kind of put that on the do not post this list. That's what analytics is for. It's to help shape and mature and change your content over time based on your audience. The thing you have to consider as well is that your audience is never going to always keep the same opinion about your business. There's other businesses out there that are competing with you. They're trying to beat you. They're trying to do better. So you need to also be doing better. You also need to be evolving products, messaging. Everything about marketing needs to shift over time. We talked about the fact that when you look at platforms, there are spaces where you can get into because you don't know that the next platform that comes out fits your business 100% like a glove. And it's the one that you need to be on. And once you're on it, your revenue skyrockets and your engagement skyrockets. So you need to always be planning kind of for the next step, whatever that step is. So those are things that you can do and you need to be considerate of, especially within Facebook, because Facebook isn't going anywhere. It's kind of outlived its time period where people thought, well, this is going to fail. They need to change things. They need to update things. And Facebook itself isn't the same platform it was when it came out. It has evolved. Now there's live video. Even just this change with the analytics and the way that they serve posts and things to their audience, those are changes that need to be made because they knew they couldn't just be Facebook, which gained all this attention and popularity right away, and become stagnant. Because if you do that, there's going to be a platform that knows the next step of what people want. So you're going to see these platforms change, which means your business is going to have to change on them as well. So back into the analytics part, we could go into reach metrics, so we can see actually how we reach outside of just the audience that likes us. We could see people that maybe liked or commented that weren't necessarily our fans. One thing with the ads too is that when you're pushing out an ad, you can push it out to people that aren't fans of you. So that's actually something nice, and we kind of call those dark posts because what you're doing is you have your engagement, you have your audience that likes you, and then if you have a piece of content that you think, okay, well, this can get us subscribers, this can get us people that interact with our brand for the first time, you can actually run ads. And one of the questions is, do you want to not serve this to the people that like you? And if your answer is yes, now you're only touching an audience that isn't aware of you on Facebook. They're not fans with you. They don't follow you. So this helps you kind of build your brand and audience. I've seen many campaigns in the past that have used this kind of idea to do really well and to really be able to measure it and go back and build their audience. And you don't necessarily have to offer something. It always doesn't have to be a 20% off. In fact, I would almost recommend you don't do that to these audiences that aren't familiar with you. I'd also recommend you don't do that with audiences that are familiar, because what I think you fall into after that is if you offer something to an audience such as a 20% off and then next week you offer 50% off, that's the only time they're going to interact with you. That's the only time they're going to engage you. They're never going to buy your product at full retail knowing that you're going to constantly offer sales. So you've skewed your audience to believe that you are a 20%, 50% off business and that anything above that isn't worth it. So think about those before you try to do these gimmicky marketing plans out there where you're pushing stuff off and you're losing customers and you're kind of selling your business short. Be really authentic. So we look at reach, we can look at those things like the people outside of the audiences, people who reported you as spam. These are all important things because at the end of the day, they affect everything that you are doing on social media. So the last part of the Facebook that I want to talk about is that I called it the Facebook. That's an original. That's a throwback. When you look at the type of post and comment, again, this is the most important metrics that you could read is to really look at the type of post so you can tell if it was a link, if it was a status, if it was a photo, or if it was video content. And then it tells you your reach, so how many people actually interacted with it. And there's a nice chart in Facebook's analytics that kind of runs it down so you could visually see. Analytics is huge, especially the visual components of it. That's why we see Google Analytics so successful and Facebook Analytics is so good, is because you can actually visually see a post that outperformed everyone else just because there's a bar there that shows you that. You also get the engagement, so you can see if a post was highly engaged. And if you, at the moment where you published that, it was organic and you didn't promote it, you could kind of look back and say, okay, well, we did this post and it had very high engagement without any kind of paid promotion for it. Well, there's also an opportunity, Facebook being who they are, to boost it right from there. You can click something, and if you have the ad side set up, it automatically goes into boosting, and you could set your audience and you could push it out even more. So you could kind of look at content and say, okay, this content works because it's a video or whatever, but we can also push it out and kind of further expose it because we know that it was successful with organic audience. So another great thing that you can use to really measure success of social media. So let's jump platforms. I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about one platform at a time, so let's go and talk about Twitter. Now, Twitter's analytics just are kind of relatively new, but again, another one of these components that just really shows you what you're doing right. In this instance, you don't need a business page. Just having your own name or user or handle, you're going to get all the analytics built into that. Facebook different, again, because you need to set up a business page in order to get those analytics. But when it comes to Twitter, you're going to get them no matter what, just because you're on that. Now, again, there's a whole advertising platform built in to Twitter, so you can actually boost things and you can promote posts and you can build audiences. And again, you're doing video, you could do images, whatever you want on the advertising side of it. In fact, I think there's enough on the advertising side of these things to do a podcast in the future, so look for that to come out as well. But let's just talk about analytics with Twitter. So you can do right away, you see 28-day summaries when you click on your analytics platform. It shows you for the last 28 days how many tweets you put out, and then it will actually compare that to the previous 28 days to show you a change, whether it was up or down. In the past probably month, I have been really kind of going at my Twitter and really focusing on what I'm putting out there and engaging people and interacting. I got really sick of seeing the handles out there that are automated. So you get these articles from these users that have a ton of followers and they follow a ton, and then you look at their content stream and it's just, you know, planned post after post to an article or to a blog that they wrote, and there's no like real sense that these people are typing these things out. And I think that that's one of the failures of Twitter, is that you don't always have an authentic statement being made. You have 140 characters for somebody, and all they do is spend hours building a timed tweet, whether it's with Hootsuite or Buffer or something like that, which, by the way, are great platforms if you're building content, I think, that's authentic and it's true. I think as a good Twitter user, you really have to go out there and interact with the audience that you're engaging with. And you'll notice that you could build a nice, strong network around things like that. So with the analytics, you'll see the tweets, you'll see the impressions, so how many people saw those tweets. That's what an impression is just somebody that scrolled over something. That's across the analytic world. Anything that is touched or seen is counted as an impression. If someone actually clicks something, that means something different. That is a click, and you can measure that as well. If it was a follow or if you got a like out of it. You get profile visits, so how many people maybe saw a tweet and then clicked on your profile, and then that correlates right along to followers. So, for instance, this last 28 days, I'm up 562% on my tweets, which, again, I said I started tweeting a lot more, but that also increased my impressions by 75%. My profile visits went up 141%, and then I've had over 1,000% on mentions, which is great because it shows you that if you're doing content, you're being authentic on Twitter, you get a lot more mentions and a lot more people that are engaging with you. And then I've also had a spike of 215 followers, which brings me up to 795, and I'm still building that. But it really shows you that along the lines and along the paths that over time, if you're really focusing on these mediums and these channels, you can follow the analytics to see how they're doing. What I really like about what Twitter does next with their analytics is they break everything out by month. So it shows you for the April of this year calendar, your top tweets, your top mention, the top follower, the tweets with photos that got noticed, enrich your tweets with Twitter cards. So there's different options built in right there of what you can do. Then there's a summary to show you, again, how many tweets you have, the impressions, the visits, the mentions, the followers. I could go down into March as well. So now I could look at the same data from March and compare the two. I think once you understand that this analytics is built in there, again, you can look at your followers and you can start to see the engagement in the community that you're in there with and how they're reacting to it. And that should really tell you content-wise how you should be producing tweets. So when you look at Facebook and Twitter now side by side and you see that they have different types of analytics, they're very different from one another, and they're really built for the platform themselves and what you do on the platform. What you can start to understand is that your audiences may be drastically different on each of them. Now, there's also the ability to go look at the audience on Twitter, so I can see it and do comparisons of my followers. A lot of my followers are in technology and tech news, business news, entrepreneurship, marketing, which is right where I want to be. So if I can look at those differences there, I may go over to my Twitter data or my Facebook data off my page and see that, well, no, it's different engagement here. I have a higher female audience for some reason. So as a business, you have to measure each platform for themselves. You can't take what you're doing on Facebook and then kick it over and apply it to Twitter, because the platform doesn't work that way. You find that there's a fine line drawn in the sand between the people that are on Facebook constantly, the people that are on Twitter constantly. You're going to have crossover maybe from Facebook to Pinterest, especially if it's a women's audience, and you may not get that from Twitter to Pinterest. So you have to be considerate of that. You may not have a Twitter audience that goes over to Instagram audience. So being able to pull out analytics for each of them and really break them down is really going to help drive the content and what you do on them. So right there you have 3 analytic types that really play into what you should be doing as a business. And I think that if you look at those well and you really dive into the data, you'll be able to really figure out, well, this is what my web audience is, this is what my Facebook audience is, this is what my Twitter audience is, and this is how I should be doing posts for each of those areas. Now when we get into just general marketing analytics, you go to the old school SWOT analysis where you're looking at your strengths, your weaknesses, your opportunities, your threats, and by doing this, you're building just the core for your product and your base and the type of industry you're in. As a business, at any point, you should have some kind of SWOT analysis done, either internally or have a business from the outside that really knows how to do this, that can go out and do some case studies, that can do some focus groups, they could reach out to people in the industries and find out who in your area, and it depends on what type of products you have. Is your product really based geographically around you, or is your product, it could be purchased across the country or across the world? Whatever the case is, doing some SWOT analysis and getting some marketing analytic data back really can help you understand a little bit more about the type of products and how to build up messaging around your business. I think the marketing analytics is huge. It's a good first step before you do anything with the business. If you haven't done it in a while and you're kind of just feel comfortable where you're at, that's fine. You don't have to. But I think there's value in visiting the market every 5 years to see what new trends there are, what new businesses are up and maybe beating you at something. Maybe you don't sell online, and maybe a business that sells the same product does sell online, and maybe they're doing a much better job with revenue because of it. So some kind of marketing analysis is going to help you understand more of that. When you get all those pieces in place, then you're able to set up your sales funnel. You're able to say and sit down with your marketing or social media team and say, here's what we're going to push out on Facebook. Here's what we're going to push out on Twitter. We're going to spend time on these 2 platforms because I think that it's going to help build a customer base. Look, at the end of the day, you don't have to sell anything on any of these platforms. Maybe your whole goal with social media is to show how kick-ass your customer service is. And that's perfectly fine. I think that's even a good kind of plan to start with, is to show, here's what our business does, here's how we treat people, and here's what people have to say about our product. Because if you build kind of a sense on each of these platforms and you have some kind of environment for people to interact with you, what you'll notice is people will interact with you. They will talk about your business. They will say things. They will comment. They will ask questions. And when you do that, then you have an environment where people could come and discover your business and see all these things. So you, at the end of the day, didn't sell a thing on these platforms, but what you did do is give yourself credibility to a customer that otherwise may never step foot in your door. They never maybe been in your shop to see what you sell. But that's a good first step, and that might lead them to pick up the phone, or that might lead to a big order online. You don't know. So you really have to just think through everything that you're doing. You can't just be, I'm on Twitter because I'm on Twitter. We talked about that. I'm going to stress that a lot. You can't just be somewhere and expect people to show up because you got there. You can't expect people to start following you on social media just because you showed up. It doesn't work that way. So when you think about the types of content that you're producing, consider this little anecdote too. When we talk about analytics and we talk about data, There's also the garbage in, garbage out concept, which is also the GIGO or GIGO, whatever you want to call it. It's a concept that's common, and it's really kind of in computer science and mathematics. When you think about why we look at this, it deals with data. And the garbage in, garbage out means that if your data coming in is dirty, it's garbage, it's going to give you bad results. So if you're on Twitter and Facebook and you're selling something that isn't relevant for your business, the data that you're going to collect over time is always going to be skewed bad data. So if I go on Facebook and Twitter and I jump on there and I'm trying to just get follows and likes and I kind of put content out there for shock value, it's not going to be good customers. It's not going to be good data to tell me, here's your customers. It's going to be skewed because it's going to be people that are just there for what you're putting out. So it's very important that you constantly put out authentic content, real content about your business or about you. If you're a personal brand, you're trying to push that, you need to be real. Because the second that you start to build up an audience that is following you for the wrong reasons, all the data and analytics behind that is going to be garbage. So that's the whole garbage in, garbage out principle. Start with good, clean data, and you're responsible for getting that because you're the one that showed up there. You're the one that said, I'm going to establish these things. I'm going to have people follow me and become fans of me and everything else. So make sure that from the start, you're not doing anything to try to go viral. You're not putting content out there to just try to get people to click it and like it and comment on it. You're putting data out there that's going to give you a nice, clean sense of who's following you and how they're interacting with you. Really think about that. Now, you're always going to have spam accounts. That's inevitable. Twitter, Facebook, even just maybe traffic that you're getting to your website can just be spammed account. You might have somebody who builds a link and sends a lot of traffic your way, but you don't understand. You can't look at it and say, we had 1,000 hits from this website, but it's out in the Ukraine and I don't know what it means. It means that somebody's spamming traffic to your website, and it's not good traffic. It's garbage data, so you need to understand that. When you have passerby traffic too, I was in a chat with somebody and we were talking about this. Passerby traffic to me is not good. So when you're hashtagging things on Instagram or Twitter just to get people to see a post because maybe they're following that hashtag, if you're putting hashtags in there just because they have a high volume, I don't think you're going to get authentic data off of that. Especially when we look at trends. You might jump on a trend on Twitter because it's been in the top 10. Maybe it's a Bieber trend, and you comment on it, and all of a sudden you get all this interaction, and you're thinking, oh my God, I'm getting all these tweets, and I'm getting all these likes and everything else. It's invaluable to your business because all you did is you got passerbys. Now, you could argue with me and say, well, I've exposed my brand a little bit. I got people to at least interact with me, and that's great, but is that the audience that you need at the end of the day? If I'm selling t-shirts and there's some t-shirt trend going on, and I hashtag that because it's a trend, and then I get passerby traffic, yeah, much more valuable than getting the Belieber traffic if you're going that way. So you now have an understanding, hopefully, of that analytics, there's power to it. The first thing you need to go do is really set up these accounts. If you haven't done so, Google Analytics is very easy to set up. If you have a Gmail account, you're already halfway there. All you have to do is go to Google Analytics and set the rest up. There's instructions on how it actually integrates into your website. It's an easy piece of code. You just make sure it exists on every page. If you have a shared file, that makes it even easier because you're just pasting it there, and it's automatically getting called in. But make sure that as you're building these that you're thinking of the whole picture, you know. So I have my analytics on my site, and I know that I'm going to be accepting traffic from these channels. So I want to know that Web Analytics is at least pulling that data in and following those sources. Again, in a future podcast, we're going to talk about AdWords and how powerful that can actually be to actually drive traffic if you set up things right. And that's advertising. I'll talk about each platform as well, because when you get them working together and you're working on the audience within that channel, it's a very, very powerful tool to have in your business. It's something that can really, really help you. So again, at the end of this, I'd like to know what you're doing with your analytics. You can hit me up on Twitter at Ross Morrone. That's at RossMorrone. You can email me at rossmorrone@gmail.com. Or you can follow me on my blog, which is rossmorrone.com. And again, what are you doing with Web Analytics? What successes and failures have you had? What issues do you have? What successes are there? What have you done correctly with your Web Analytics, and how have you applied that back into your business and saw great value come from that? I'd love to hear it. I'd love to get in discussions. I'd love to answer questions. If you have any questions about analytics, anything that we talked about, feel free to reach out to me. Again, thank you for listening to the This Is Marketing podcast. I'm Ross Morrone, and we'll talk to you next time.